Well, the reason why it's the reason why understanding is hard to develop, because in order to do it, one needs to know what must be understood. So it might sound like self-explanatory, but the point is, it's not. Understanding takes repetition, so one needs to make the effort of drilling a topic, a theme that needs to be clarified, that one wants to develop clarity in regard to. And in order to do that, you need to know what to look for. You need to know how to approach it and what to understand. So getting information about it, it's absolutely necessary. But information in itself, as vast as it can be, that is not understanding. And that's also another thing that sometimes people would confuse. Knowing a lot about something does not mean you understood what that means, especially when it comes down to nature of things, the nature of feelings, the nature of intentions, the nature of experience as a whole. So when it comes to practicing the Dhamma, see, most people would either just mystify it, as in go after the experience of like a novelty or some energy release or something new, and then they would refer to that as understanding. But if you cannot explain an experience, whatever that is, to yourself at least, or make it intelligible to yourself or to somebody else, you should not think you understood it. Now, of course, you might be you're free to use your own words, so to speak. You don't have to use templates of descriptions and so on, but the point is, you will still be able to convey the meaning if you understood that experience in its nature. And that's the crucial factor here: meaning of the experience, meaning of the whatever it might have happened to you that you think was somehow worthy in your practice, in your meditation, or in any other area of life for that matter. And that's when you realize that most of the time, actually, even things you think you understood, upon which you act and you choose and you live your life, you haven't actually understood the meaning behind. You just do it. It made sense, or as the Buddha said, you would be doing these things or holding those views simply because it pleases you. That's the sole criteria for most people. I find the idea of this pleasing, and that's why I defend that view, and that's why I defend these actions, or I do them, and so on. Either way, there is no understanding of those same things, and that's the important difference that we're trying to highlight here. Basically, it's not about the experience that you might have or you might get. It's about understanding it. And if understanding is the focus, that's when you realize the content of the experience doesn't matter as much, as long as it's wholesome, as long as it's based on restraint and virtue. Then you realize it's the understanding that matters. Understanding of any experience. That's what results in freedom from suffering. That's what results in fulfilling the practice of Dhamma. And that's what the Buddha said himself. Like when he said whether the five aggregates, when they're fully understood, one is finished the work. And he said it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter what content of the five aggregates. He would say, it doesn't matter if past, future, present, far, near, up, down, below, behind, any shape or form, it's going to be within the experience as a whole, which means going to be within the five aggregates, and that is something that a person has understood. So the reason why this practice is harder than to just sit and sort of try to develop calmness or some pleasant abiding through the practice of concentration is because it will result initially in sort of causing doubt, restlessness in your mind, and that's how you do it properly. By working through these things, whereby you learn to be imperturbable in the face of the thinking mind, not other way around. You're afraid of the thinking mind because it disturbs you, and then you try to stop the thinking. You try to concentrate on a little point, so you don't have to think about anything else. It's you who should develop strength in order to be imperturbable, not control the content that disturbs you, that perturbs you. So it's important to then obviously read the suttas and get the idea as to what needs to be understood. But very often it comes down to that tedious, ambiguous, heavy drilling of your thought. Like you sit down. I don't know if you read the sutta that they was talking about, for example, feelings and intentions. Say intentions. You sit down and ask yourself. I mean, obviously sit down quietly. Don't be in a crowded environment and so on. Just have some environmental control, so to speak. There won't be any disturbances, phones ringing and so on. And ask yourself, intention. What is intention? Do I know what intention is? For me, for myself, in my own experience, when I say intention to you or to anybody, what do I refer to? Is it understood? What is it? Whatever it is, do I understand it, or I just go sort of float on the surface of the meaning of intention, vague meaning that I kind of have? How would you explain intention? Try write it down. What is intention? And then afterwards read that and see if it makes any sense to you. If it does, then push the questions further. So in this case, you ask yourself, what is intention? What is my intention? Like now, I have intention to be seated here and contemplate on the nature of intention. What is that intention that's making me do this? What is it? Is it a fleeting thought? Well, it isn't, because I'm still seated trying to contemplate these things. Which means that thought is present throughout these more particular actions that I'm doing, that I'm trying to contemplate. I remain seated. I still haven't switched on my phone. I still haven't opened my door to the world. So all these other things I do through or on the basis of simultaneously present more general intention, which is to ponder on the nature of intention, or the nature of feeling, or the nature of five aggregates. So how else would you then describe that presently enduring intention? Is it a thought? Is it is it perceived? It is, because if it weren't, you wouldn't be able to talk about it. You wouldn't be able to designate it even for yourself, let alone for others. So it's a peripheral thought. You're not, see, when you, like in this case, we have intention to sit down and contemplate. You're not seated, you don't have to keep it in front of your mind, as in while you're sitting, while you're contemplating. You don't have to keep saying to yourself, I want to sit, I want to contemplate, that's my intention. No, because these actions already carry that intention. That's how intentions work. That's why I keep saying the most important thing for somebody who wants to start the practice, or somebody who's already developing, is to develop full transparency in regard to presently enduring motivations behind their smallest action. That's how you get to discern the fundamental aspect of wholesome or unwholesome, bad and good and bad, and especially to discern where your actions are rooted at. Because if you're not aware of this peripheral thought of your intention that sort of directs all of your particular actions while it endures, you're not aware of it, of where that action, those actions are rooted. That's why intention is wholesome, unwholesome, or it can be neutral as well. But for practical sake, just look for wholesome and unwholesome. If it's unwholesome, avoid it. If it's wholesome, don't try to deny it or fear it. Just let it be. Let it endure. Either way, they arise on their own. But your responsibility is not try to prevent them from arising. Your responsibility is to try to prevent yourself from acting out of it. So, as I said, even if you're a beginner, sit down quietly, semi-protected environment. You're not distracted, and pick up things you're doing. Pick up things you want to do. Bring them forward to your mind, and then think about why you want to do it. Oh, it's because of this, and this. Yeah, well, why is this, and this a reason for me to do these things? Why did I choose that to be the reason? It's always on you. Intention is always your responsibility. That's why the Buddha said every action is intention. You can't commit an action without having it been rooted in intention to commit that action. And that's why beings are owners of their action. Only you, nobody else. Which means you are fundamentally always responsible. It's not negotiable or optional. So you sit down here quietly, ask yourself, what is the nature, what is intention? When I say intention, what am I referring to in this experience as a whole? So we kind of established it's a sort of ambiguous peripheral thought. The idea, a context of all these little things I'm doing. You don't have to keep staring at little things that you're doing in order to discern the intention. Why? Because the intention always comes first, structurally. Simultaneously, intentions and actions through your intentions are present, but intention is it's deeper, so to speak. It's not that you have the intention and then the actions. You have intentions and you have your environment in regard to which you have intentions. But that's when you recognize that these intentions determine the course of my action, and for that I'm responsible for saying yes or no to it. So we establish that intention in the most fundamental, most basic, the most straightforward description, it's a thought. Right thought, bad thought, basically. So you have a thought that gives the context to your present actions. But if you're unaware of that thought, it means you're unaware of the nature of it, whether the nature is wholesome or unwholesome. And if that is the case, then means you will not know whether your actions are rooted in good or bad. Through avoiding responsibility for your intentions, you end up avoiding responsibility for your actions down the line. That's why the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, that's why sila and virtue always has to come first. Like you can avoid responsibility only, you're allowed to, well not allowed to, but you have to start narrowing down your avoidance of responsibility. Someone who doesn't keep the precepts, he avoids responsibility left and right, and there is no basis for Dhamma whatsoever. Then you start keeping the precepts, 5 precepts, 8 precepts or more. That's where you create a basis. Okay, I might avoid responsibility here and there until I invest enough work into that and rectify it. But at least I will not avoid responsibility past this point, past the 5 precepts or 8 and so on. So that's it. You kind of start rounding up that avoidance of responsibility for your actions, that they can clarify your responsibility for your actions, that can then bring further clarity that your responsibility goes even beyond that, and it rests on the responsibility for welcoming the thought of greed, the thought of aversion, ill will, cruelty, the thought of distraction. That's where the Buddha would say the noble disciple, the one with the right view, who has developed clarity in regard to the nature of his intentions, all he has to do is not tolerate and not delight and not welcome the unwholesome thoughts. And all he has to do is not be ignorant and distract himself from wholesome thoughts. So when unwholesome intentions arise, he's aware of it, but he doesn't need to do anything. All he needs to do is abstain from doing anything on account of it. So he knows, I will not welcome this, and I will not entertain this thought to stay even a second longer. If that attitude is present, he will be unable to act out of it. That's just impossible. The only way you can act out of unwholesome intentions is if you ignore them to be unwholesome. As soon as you're aware of their unwholesomeness, you cannot act. So it's mutually exclusive. You must ignore unwholesome in order to act out of it. And that's exactly why ignorance is the most blameworthy, and it's kind of a fundamental prerequisite for anything unwholesome. And also, I guess you could mention that ignorance, as you can see now, it's not a metaphysical sort of secret, mystery. It's this very act of ignoring responsibility, avoiding transparency, avoiding the recognition of your choice in regard to the present intentions. That's ignorance. That's why you perpetuate it through your own actions. Ignorant actions perpetuate ignorance, because of which actions are ignorant. So it's a vicious circle. But you can break through it if you start accepting that responsibility, if you start looking at the motivation behind your action and then developing clarity in regard to its nature. As I said, what is the nature of intention? When I say intention, what do I refer to it? Do I refer to a specific thought or general thoughts? Do I refer to a mood, a feeling? What is it? The main problem is not necessarily not being able to give an answer right away. The main problem is not even attempting to think about it in the first place, which is what most people do. Because it's so ambiguous initially that our thinking is used to thinking about like positive categories, things that are in front of you. So you trying to step back from that without losing sight of it. It's going to take quite some effort, because we are used to just being focused on the content. But now you have to be discerning the nature in regard to the present content. So that's why this kind of thinking requires constant drilling and lots of setups and prerequisite of virtue and sense restraint in order to take the root. Otherwise, it just won't happen. You're just floating from one content onto the other. So you can pick up anything. You can also pick up the aggregated feeling, for example, and ask yourself, what do I feel right now? What is the nature of the feeling? How could I describe it? Oh, is it like this? Is it like that? Yeah, but what am I describing now? If I say, oh, I feel light, and well, are those feelings or are those perceptions of lightness and so on? Feeling is, as the suttas say, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. So all these perceptions I'm talking about, I feel light, I feel heavy, I feel this, I feel that, I feel... Where would they be rooted, fundamentally, presently? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So that's how you start clarifying the feeling. You realize most often things we think feelings are, it's actually talking about perceptions and thoughts and concepts. And you will be talking about those things for as long as you don't make the effort to think about what the actual feeling is. So you could see that practice of right understanding, practice of developing the right view, it's not about, as I said, building on this great system that will then culminate in release of energy and some mystical experience through a practice and effort. It's really about undoing the state of Putujana, which is the starting point for everyone. So it's not building something new on top of the state of Putujana, it's just simply obliterating everything that makes you Putujana. That's how you become a Sotapanna. So lack of understanding replaced with understanding means all the wrong views are gone. Lack of understanding in regard to what? In regard to the nature of your experience. In regard to 5 aggregates, in regard to the suffering, freedom from it, in regard to pick up any topic from the sutta. Fully understand it, you would have then undone your ignorance that was keeping you, that was maintaining you a Putujana. That's just how it works, pretty much. So in terms of meditation, again, you don't have to start with some excessively complex topics, relationship between Nama Rupa and Vijnana Nama Rupa and so on. Just pick up things you think you know, and then really investigate, and by that I mean contemplate rightly, not just think about information you have about it. So pick up things you know and see whether you really know them. So don't pull any punches, don't be afraid of what you might discover, but really dedicate yourself towards clarifying the meaning, which means make yourself open to possibility of doubt, which can be very unpleasant. The way you're going to deal with that doubt is, it's going to be self-evident if you have had your sila established beforehand. If you've been living virtuously, and you recognize the necessity of virtue, well, that will take care of the unpleasantness of doubt and restlessness and so on. But you have to go through with it. So the longer a person who wants to practice Dhamma avoids it, the harder it's going to be to do it later on. So you can just ask yourself about things you think you understood. Whatever that is, whatever sutta you read you think it made sense, question it. Or even ask yourself what you want to get out of the practice. Like, do you want peace? How would you define peace? Do you have clarity in regard to what peace means? I want to be peaceful. What does that mean? Peaceful means non-disturbed. Okay, so take it a step further. What is the disturbance then? How are you disturbed? Are you disturbed when you experience things you don't want to experience? Are you disturbed when you don't experience things you want to experience? What's in common to any form of disturbance? The common is suffering. It's unpleasant. If disturbance is not unpleasant, it wouldn't be a disturbance. So then you want peace, which is freedom from disturbance, which means peace is freedom from unpleasant feeling. So freedom from suffering. So peace equals absence of suffering altogether. Now you will say, of course, that makes sense. But by going through these motions of like reflexive drilling, you are actually clarifying it layer by layer. So next time, when something bothers you, you suffer on account of it, you realize, well, I'm not automatically disturbed by things that bother me. I'm only disturbed when I start suffering on account of things that bother me. So peace is not having anything come your way. Peace is about not being disturbed, not suffer on account of whatever comes your way. Ultimately, sickness, aging and death will come your way. That's not negotiable. So these little layers that you will be undoing through reflection, that's all it matters. That's how you practice gradually, bit by bit by bit. So then, again, other suttas will start making more sense as well. So when the Buddha says that the root of suffering is your own craving, not the conditions in regard to which you crave, that you realize, okay, so you end up, you're affected by disturbance of any kind because you disturb yourself. Nobody else, nothing else. And that can sound almost, quite blunt in a way, but at the same time, it's the best possible news you can receive. Because if suffering were truly rooted in circumstances or other people's actions, you can't control that. You can't even access that, so you wouldn't be able to free yourself from it. But it isn't, and that's the good news. So, like the Buddha's teaching, it should be really considered like a very strict form of optimism. It's recognizing the problem and knowing exactly what to do about it. So when you recognize that the problem of you being disturbed by things which make you non-peaceful, which is a problem, which is what you don't want, lies in you craving. Craving for what? Craving for the presently pleasant feeling to stay longer, or simply to stay. Craving for the presently unpleasant feeling to go away as soon as possible, and craving for the neutral feeling to be ignored. Practically, those are the three attitudes that perpetuate your liability to suffering. So in order to stop craving in regard to these feelings, you have to learn how to discern these feelings for what they are. And that brings us to the point we discussed. Feeling. What is feeling? When I say feeling, I feel this. What am I referring to? What is the phenomenon? What is the thing present in my experience as a whole that I designate by saying feeling? I feel pleasure. What is it? How would you describe your pleasant feeling? Don't necessarily jump answering it. I describe it like this. Just pause, ask yourself the question, let the question endure. For as long as if your mind starts wandering away, ask the question again. And then try to think about it a little bit more, but don't necessarily rush into an answer. Why? It's because you don't want to be producing the answer, you want to be discerning it. Why? Because that present feeling is present. You don't need to answer it in order for that feeling to be there. The fact that you were able to designate it means it's there. But it's your preconceived notions about the feeling, that's what obscures you understanding its nature. That's what Mula Pariyaya Sutta, it describes that all the conceivings you do on account of the arisen experience, not before the arisen experience. So it's clearing out of misconceivings or conceivings and discerning it for what it is. If you can discern the nature, the presently enduring feeling for what it is, you will be unable to crave it. That's why understanding automatically results in freedom from assumption and craving.